is a Canadian living in Switzerland for the last 19 years. John is a member of Toastmasters for 8 years, and he helped us to give a presentation training skills for the European engineering productivity team. This is how I met him, and he's also very passionate about biofeedback. He's been a coach and a trainer for the last 14 years. Before this, he was an entrepreneur. He worked for a government agency and worked in sales. John's presentation is about the different state of the brain. And since the brain is our best tool in our daily work and everyday life, I thought it would be very interesting to hear him. And also, I think our brain deserves the best care. John has a company called Focus Fitness. All right, so here's John.
Thank you, Phil, for that introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here talking to the Googlers. One of the biggest challenges that we can have in our lives is the challenge of simplicity. Taking something that is complicated, a complicated process, and making it more simplified so that people can understand what you're trying to explain. And Googlers are constantly trying to do this. So with my presentation, what I've done, I've tried to make it as simple as possible. I hope that some of you don't find it too insulting. And I've just tried to keep it simple. We have a short period of time. So let's get right to it. My speech, as you can see, is about achieving self-sustainability with neurofeedback and biofeedback. As Phil mentioned, I've been doing coaching and training for the past 14 years. And my focus has been basically on focus. I've been training people how to pay attention better, to focus better. And the idea was to get their focus to be longer. And during this time, I developed a very strong interest in the concept of tasking. There's a lot of reference made to a lot of research in the brain now, and they talk about tasking, how long people can stay on task. And what I want to show you is a very simple tasking model. And in this tasking model, you can see that rest, then you have the initiative to get on task, then you have the task. Now the task can be a project, it can be a job, it can be anything. The time is irrelevant. And then we have resilience. And that's the concept of getting off task or stopping. And we get back to rest again. Now my understanding of sustainability was the task, to sustain. How long can we stay on task? That was my understanding. But since that time, in the past, I guess, 4 to 5 years, what I have found is that this concept, this task, trying to stay on task has been creating problems. People have been crashing. People are suffering from stress. They're suffering from depression, they're suffering from anxiety, and they're burning out, or they're basically just crashing. Now this task, this tasking model can also apply to multitasking. And this is doing a number of tasks, getting onto the task and doing a number of tasks over a lengthy period of time. This has also been a very encouraged and supported trait in the past number of years, and has also contributed to people having burnout. And this is basically what's happening, is rather than people having a choice of getting off task, they're being forced off task through sickness or possible death. Now, about 3 or 4 months ago, I had a conversation with a colleague, a very good friend of mine, who was once a professor at the university, and he was a professor in forestry. And the people in forestry, in their opinion, is that most people don't understand what sustainability is truly all about. And as a matter of fact, they even say the concept of sustainability came out of the forestry industry. And Mr. Barishka, a short time ago, gave a speech about sustainability. And within that speech, he tried to give the definition of sustainability. And in there he said that the producing power of all renewable goods is limited. Any consumption that surpasses the reproduction rate over a long period of time will endanger the stock, and in worst case, it can lead to its demise. I've made that in boldface because I think that's the most important part of his definition. And he goes on to say sustainability means, like in the case of Swiss forest, the harvest is always smaller, or at most equal to the carefully determined growth rate. And he really, with this, he really got me to think. And I realized that we are a resource. And what's happening in our determination to be successful, to increase our concentration times, to increase our focus times, our ability to pay attention, is what's happening is that we are crashing. And what's happening is that we're endangering the stock. Us. We are the stock. We are becoming endangered. And in the worst case, it can lead to its demise. There are cases now of people who are having, young people who are having heart attacks. As a matter of fact, I heard of a good friend of mine, a friend of his, just had a heart attack, age 35, and he died. There are people who are burning out in early ages of the 20s and early 30s. I've even been working with young children who are suffering from stress. So, what I'm realizing is that the concept of, if we go back to my model, is that we're turning on and turning off, is that I've been helping people turn on and try to stay turned on for the past 14 years. And I've become aware that we need to start focusing on getting people to turn off and be at rest. And this is what I want to focus on in my short speech today. So sustainability basically includes the concept of initiate, the task, resilience, and rest. So when I thought about this is that I realized that I have a new interpretation of sustainability. This is a very simple project model again. And then I became aware that sustainability encompasses much more. Rather than just staying on the project or staying on task, it encompasses the whole process. And this is what's happening right now. There's a lot of talk about sustainability in the world today. And a lot of people don't really understand that it encompasses the whole process of learning how to turn off and turn on. And I have found that rest is the most important thing that we're missing today in our lives. We don't know how to take off time and rest. Now, I'm not talking about taking a cool vacation a couple times a year. I'm talking about learning how to rest on a daily basis. So why is rest important? Well, I came up with the 3 R's. Rejuvenate, reflect, and re-energize. Like the forest, we need to rejuvenate. When we go to sleep at night, there's a rejuvenation process going on. What's happening is that we're healing. Our bodies heal, they start to grow, and they get ready to wake up the next day for the next task. We need to do that on a daily basis. When we are also in rest, we have an opportunity to reflect. Because when we reflect, when we're in that rest period, we have a different perspective on life. And then what we can do in our reflection, we can look back on our tasks that we've been doing or the previous day, and we can see possibly some mistakes that we've made that we would not be able to see if we continued on at a very high state of mind. So reflection is very beneficial to us. And then we re-energize. And there's a big problem today with people getting bored or people are being called lazy. I don't like the word lazy. It's all about motivation. So when we can rejuvenate and reflect and get more motivated again, then we're more re-energized to get on that task and get going again. So what are the benefits of resting to Googlers, to anybody that matter? Well, for one, our productivity rate is that we're going to be more productive. Now, I had a client some time ago. He was a banker, and he came to me, and he had what we call psoriasis on his hands. His hands were cracked. They were almost wide open. The doctors couldn't help him, and they were giving him shots and medication, and they couldn't help him. And so we talked for a while, and I basically asked him what he was doing everything for. What was the purpose? And it made him think. And what happened was he decided to change his way of life. And he was telling me that at one time, when he worked for the bank, he was working from hours from 8 till 8. He was coming home late, wasn't seeing his family, and basically committing his whole life to his job. He changed his style of living, and he started doing hours from 9 till 5. And he told me that he got more accomplished, he was more productive from 9 to 5 than he'd ever been from 8 till 8. Because he was not taking breaks in between. And what can happen when you go into that period of rest, it has an effect of calming us emotionally. It has an effect of calming us in our body. And it has an effect of calming our brains. When I'm calmer, I also have the ability to accept change better. Today, we are experiencing a lot of change. Even within Google, there's going to be changes happening. And when you're calmer and you're more flexible, then you can accept the change. Communication is much better. As we become rested and we're more fresh, we can hear and we can talk much better. Ideas are communicated better. We increase our longevity. Either we increase our longevity in our daily tasks, or we can increase our longevity within our employment. We have more creativity. Again, as we get into a restful period, as we calm our minds, we become more creative. We sleep better. As we take rest periods, we calm our brains, we're able to sleep. We have less headaches, less pains. So there's many benefits to calming down and getting into our rest periods. Now, have you ever been in a bad mood that you just can't seem to get out of? Have you ever had a racing mind, or you just can't turn it off, and you just can't go to sleep? And it seems that the harder you try, the worse it gets. This is one of the reasons why people are having a tough time turning off. What happens is that we get stuck in brain states. We don't know how to get out. And what we often do, we look to other avenues to get ourselves out of brain states. We look to meditation or yoga. And these are excellent ways of getting out of different, and practicing and learning how to get out of different brain states. But unfortunately, many of us, though, look at other avenues. We often get into computer games. We often get into watching TV. And the thing is that when we are doing these things, what's happening is that we are not turning off our brains. Our brains are still active. When you're watching TV, you ever sat down and watched TV and say you're going to have a break? Well, you lay down and you watch the TV, but your brain is still busy, and you're still not rested. Some people try and turn off with alcohol or drugs or medications. We're all looking for something from the outside. Now, the question is, how do we get unstuck? How can we do this? And I have found that neurofeedback and biofeedback are an excellent tool to help people to get out of brain states, to get out of mind states, to get out of emotional states, to get out of body states. And it's a training through practice that we learn to do this. So the question is, what is biofeedback? Biofeedback is, the key word in biofeedback is feedback. An electrode is attached to the body, and then information is fed back to you about your body. It's non-invasive. Nothing is put into the body. And one thing I liked about this feedback process is that it's very objective. It's not subjective. You go to a psychologist or you go to your doctor, you give them information, and then they feed back information to you based on either their personal opinion or what they've learned. Whereas when you go and you do neurofeedback or you do biofeedback, information is fed back to you about your body. It is a mirror. You attach an electrode to the body and it's a mirror. You get to see yourself. A perfect example even is taking a thermometer. You take a thermometer, you stick it in your mouth, you take the thermometer out, and what it does, it just tells you what your temperature is. So it tells you. A lot of us are very unaware of where we are and what we are. And biofeedback has a way of saying, here, this is the position, this is where you are. A lot of people aren't aware what states they're in. It's a tool. So it measures first. It measures, it tells you, it measures, and then it's used as a tool to learn how to change how you're responding to life. And the other aspect about biofeedback is based on the concept of self-regulation. And this is what I like about biofeedback and neurofeedback. It's all about the self. It's learning how to take your life into your hands. So, what is neurofeedback? Neurofeedback is a way of reading the brain waves. What we do is we attach an electrode to the brain or to the scalp. We don't put anything in, and it's attached with just some paste, and it's stuck onto your scalp. And what you do is we read a brainwave, the EEG, the electroencephalograph. And this is what we see is this raw brainwave. Now, I got into neurofeedback at the very beginning, some 14 years ago, before I got into the other type of biofeedback. And what happened is that a member of my family had been taking this medication called Ritalin, and he wanted off. He felt that he wasn't in control with the medication. So I happened to read about this neurofeedback, and they were offering a course in the United States. So I decided to take this course because it was non-invasive, it was not a medication, it was an alternative. Now I need to give you a little bit of background. Before I flew to the States, I also had been having some issues with some neck pains and headaches due to stress. My wife and I are both being a therapist. And actually it was her that motivated me to take the course. So I hopped on the plane, flew to New Orleans, and as you can imagine, I had a headache. I had some neck pains due to the stress of flying over and the jet lag. And I started this course, and after 4 or 5 days, they let us test this neurofeedback, and that was in an afternoon. That evening, I wanted to go out for dinner, But before I went out, I went to my hotel room to rest a little bit, turned on the TV, and I happened to turn my head to one side, and I noticed that there was no pain. It was unbelievable. I had been living with this neck pain and headaches for quite some time, and I thought, wow, this is really something. So that evening we went out, and we went to this restaurant, a seafood restaurant. I like seafood. And I had to wait an hour for a table. And it was the coolest thing. I had no problem waiting. Usually I've been very impatient. I'd be kind of nervous and wanting to sit down. This time I was so calm and so cool. The next day I wrote the check. I flew back to Switzerland and proceeded to train my son. Now, neurofeedback was first really developed in 1965 by a fellow named Dr. Barry Sterman in California. And he had been doing sleep studies, helping people to learn how to sleep better. And what he was doing, he was using cats. And what he was doing, he was attaching electrodes to their brains and trying to encourage different types of brain waves. And he was using the Pavlov theory and through conditioned response. And he would give the cats milk when they produced a certain brainwave. Now, halfway through his studies, is a very well-known story, he was contacted by NASA, and he was told that they were having trouble with people having epileptic seizures and dying from the jet fuel, from the fumes, and they wanted to find out why. So, of course, he headed off, and he started to do the research, and with using cats again. And he had about 20 cats, and lo and behold, 10 of the cats were not reacting, and 10 were. And it was one of those instances of the whole head scratching of they couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, what they found out was a new researcher had gone out and bought 10 new cats, and they brought 10 of the old cats, and it was the 10 old cats that were not responding. And they found out that this training that they were doing, this work they were doing with the cats, had stabilized their brains and had strengthened their brains. This was a eureka. This was a phenomenal discovery. So Dr. Sterman went back to his research labs, and so for the next number of years, he researched neurofeedback. He went into working with epilepsy. He had helped a number of people get off medications. He helped people avoid operations. He even helped one lady to get her driver's license. The study went into ADHD, it went into autism, it went into Asperger's, and it's just blossomed now into other areas. Now, we take this one raw signal and then we filter it out into other frequencies. The one main signal is made up of all of these different types of frequencies. And what happens is that at certain times our brains can produce a predominance of these frequencies. So what we have, everybody's heard of alpha, beta, theta, delta. You can see that the frequencies are all different. And each of these frequencies represents a state of our brain. So if we have a predominance of delta in our brain, basically our brain is asleep. Most of the time we're sleeping when we produce delta. And actually, which is interesting, there are some people who have delta even when their eyes are open. Basically, their brains are asleep, but their eyes are open. Theta is the next one, which measures 4 to 7 hertz, and it's drowsiness. And a lot of people, when they meditate, they're trying to get into this frequency. This frequency is also can be a very creative frequency. Then we have alpha, and everybody's, everything is alpha. Alpha is this neutral state, it's a relaxed state, it's a reflecting state. When I think of alpha, I think of the lion in Africa sitting underneath the tree on a hot afternoon, and then we see he's sitting there and he sees his dinner go walking by. what he does, he jumps into beta, 12 to 18. He runs after that animal, catches the animal, has his dinner, then he goes back underneath the tree, and he's back into 8 to 12 again. But it's a very open, aware, relaxed state of mind. There's the high beta of 19 to 30, which is the busy or anxious thinking or fearful. It's very active. Now, what we did, our initial work, is the way we work, and we were rewarding and inhibiting certain brain waves. As you were watching your brain waves, we would use this rewards of either a sound or an animation. So these brain waves are filtered, they're enlarged, and converted into an animation. So you're basically sitting there watching your brain waves in the form of a game. And then you can learn how to change your brain waves and get into another state. A person such as myself, who is a neurofeedback trainer or coach, we are sitting in there setting goals for you. And if you achieve the brainwave that we believe that you should be having, the game will go. But if you have too much of a certain brainwave, you can stop it. We all want to be rewarded. We all want to do well. So we practice this, and we can learn how to change our brain states. It's a learning process, and it can happen. Now, what I'm interested in myself, neurofeedback is often referred to as a therapy. And at the very beginning, in the number of years that I worked, I was working with autistics, I was working with epileptics, I was working with Asperger's, and I was working with a lot of these therapeutical states. In my opinion, what I was feeling is that, like attention deficit disorder, sometimes they use the word disorder, and it gives the concept of broken, and I really don't like that. I think that everybody has problems, we have issues, and we can all train ourselves and get better, some people more than others. My areas I'm interested in is in performance enhancement, to help people improve their performance in life. Now, if you take a look at this other simple model that I have of a task, you can see that when we're at rest, we're usually in an alpha state, which is 8 to 12 hertz. So that's the objective. That's what I try to get people into, is an 8 to 12. Then what they do is they initiate, and then they get into the beta, 12 to 18. So they're more focused. They're busy at work, and then again we become resilient. We get back down again, and we get into the rest period. Any questions? Now, before I start with this is my favorite slide. I think it's a good indicator of how we feel when we're stressed. I use biofeedback versus the neurofeedback to help people deal with stress. Biofeedback is when we attach an electrode to some place on the body, be it the finger to measure hand temperature, be it on the earlobe to measure your heart rate, or you can measure your muscle rate. And what we do is that we can, again, see how our body is responding. So I can see my heart rate, and then I can learn how to change my heart rate. Because a heart rate is a part of the autonomic nervous system. And if I'm nervous, or if I'm stressed, what happens is that my heart rate increases, my breathing increases, my stomach is affected, because all of our energy is put into doing what we call the fight or flight response, really prepared to do battle. And that's where we are when we get stressed. We're into that state. So biofeedback, I introduced biofeedback in my practice maybe a couple years after I was doing neurofeedback, because biofeedback, number one, is the equipment is much less expensive. And what I do is I give the equipment to my clients, and they take it home, and they can practice it 5 to 10 minutes per day, or a number of times per day. And then they get to understand. And what's really important is about self-regulation again, is that if you try to change something or affect something, it gets worse because you become tense. So we're trying to force a situation. Biofeedback is about self-regulation, and it's learning about what do I need to do to get from point A to B, not the case of trying to force it. Now, with stress and biofeedback is the quarter report. We're very relaxed. We're at peace. We start working on the quarterly report, and what happens is that the pressure is on, and then we become stressed. And we become into the heightened state of alert. When we're finished, the quarterly report, everything's finished, then all of a sudden we let go, and we get down into our relaxed state. Now, the problem with this type of, the heightened state of alert is that a lot of people have trouble letting go, getting down into a relaxed state again. A lot of people have trouble with resilience. And some people, it takes longer. And some people stay in a heightened state of alert. Now, if you can imagine that you've got a body that's prepared to do battle, the muscles are tense, the stomach isn't working, your breathing is increased, your heart rate's increased on a very long-term basis, you can imagine what it can do. The body is going to get tired. It's going to get weak. So if you can imagine, a lot of people have problems with their stomachs. And the reason why they have problems with their stomach is that their stomach isn't working, and we eat and we put food on a stomach that isn't working. Yeah, we're going to have problems. And the same thing with the stress. A lot of people have neck pains and headaches, and a lot of that is caused by the stress, being in that constant state of alert. So what we have to learn how to do is, again, get down, let go. Now, what are the benefits to Googlers? As I mentioned, neurofeedback and biofeedback can help the Googlers in the form of stress, in dealing with stress. The biofeedback can help sometimes, but sometimes we're going to need neurofeedback because people become so stuck in the state of alert that it almost becomes what we call a comfort zone. I don't like using that term because that means we have a decision. What happens is that we become stuck in states because we develop neuronal pathways. And it's developed over a period of time, and we just become stuck there. We can't get out of that. And no matter how hard we try. So we need to learn how to do it. So there are benefits to the Googlers to use biofeedback and neurofeedback to start thinking about sustainability, because it's going to help them deal with stress. It's going to help them deal in their meetings. It's going to help them increase their productivity, increase their creativity, their self-reliance, flexibility, ability to accept change. Now, I was talking a little bit earlier about being in the alert state. And what happens is that in that alert state, we have a higher frequency. We're above the 18 hertz. So we are in the 18 to 30 or 40 hertz state of mind. And this is that's, if you can look at this you can see in the blue, we are in that state, in a very heightened state of alert. We're not in the normal state. So when we're in that normal state, if we're going to try and have communication and work with people, in that heightened state of alert, we're also very aggressive. We're very narrowly focused. So you have two Googlers, Googler 1 and Googler 2, who go into a meeting, and they have to sit down and talk to each other. They have to listen to each other. They have to trade ideas. But if they're both very narrowly focused, aggressive, you're not going to have trade of information. You're going to have conflict. So the objective is to try to get into a more relaxed state. So let's say Googler 2 gets into a more relaxed state. Well, then Googler 1 is still up in a high state. Then you'll have this type of a process. And Googler 1 or Googler 2 is just going to see the futility of trying to communicate with the aggressive one. So the objective, of course, is that we have Googler 1 and Googler 2 both in a restful, calm, alpha state. They can learn how to do this before the meeting, and they can practice this so that we go into meetings, we're more open to others' ideas. When we are in that higher state, which I mentioned on the other slide, the blue state, if you can imagine that we are doing this for a very long period of time, if we're doing it on multitasking basis, you will see that over a long period of time, we have the crashes I mentioned earlier. The thing is, when we crash and we get down, we drop down, it's awful hard to get back up again. So the idea is that what we need to do is learn how to prevent ourselves from crashing. Now, longevity. This is a very important state of mind. This is very important to anybody, including Googlers, in regard to their projects. How do I stay on project? If I can practice getting out of state, of the higher state, I will increase my longevity. Because I will be healthier, I will be stronger. So the longevity will be increased in regard to not only your projects, but your business, your employment. Now, what biofeedback can do for you, I've already mentioned, is about self-regulation. Self-regulation is about, again, figuring out what I can do for me. It's about figuring out what do I need to do to get from point A to point B. It's not about force. It's about learning how to allow something to go. It's learning to be able to trust in yourself. It's about allowing what you have to come forth. What happens is that when we're in a higher state, we get into a controlling state. We try to force a situation. But if we can learn how to trust, then we can trust in what we already know. And this is what you're hired for at Google. You are intelligent people. And when we try to control that, we don't allow the intelligence to come out. It was often said that Albert Einstein had his best and creative times when he was asleep. So when he was asleep, his brain was turned down, and then what happened was the ideas started to flow. I myself do a reflection 3 or 4 times a week. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I work on calming my body, my mind, and my emotions. And it can go for 15, 20 minutes or half an hour. And then I go back to bed and I have a wonderful sleep. Often, if I do this, all of a sudden ideas start to flow. Everything becomes clear. And often I will do my writing at that time in the morning. So, the connection between self-regulation and self-sustainability. So self-sustainability, we need to start focusing on self. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I gave a presentation to a group of people up at a place called The Hub. I'm not sure if you've heard of The Hub. It's a place where people who are entrepreneurs can go and work. They just take their laptops, and for a fee they can go whenever they want to. But these people who are members of this are involved in some type of a venture that is based on sustainability. And they wanted me to talk about where's the crossroads between sustainability and entrepreneurialism. And in my work, I have found that there isn't a crossroads. In my opinion, is that a successful entrepreneur is self-sustainable. Because an entrepreneur is very independent, he's full of energy, he's got a lot of imagination, it's all about himself. And if that entrepreneur is not healthy, and if he's not around, then the organization falls apart. It depends on him. He does not have somebody to say, well, okay, it's time to take a coffee break, it's time to have lunch. He's got to have that self-determination, that self-planning, that self-discipline to know when to turn on and turn off. And that's the objective of sustainability, is knowing when to turn off. You've got to recognize, and this is what biofeedback can do, when you practice over a lengthy period of time, is that you will start to recognize when it's time to turn off, or possibly turn on. But you can recognize this. Most of us this day do not recognize it, or we are afraid of turning off. So as I mentioned, my new definition of self-sustainability is based on the whole process. And there were two people who did tremendous work about biofeedback back in the 60s and 70s, and Elmer and Alice Green. And they wrote a book called Beyond Biofeedback, and it almost became a little bit of a Bible to me. But she wrote in there, suddenly I realized that it isn't biofeedback that is the panacea. It is the power within the human being to self-regulate, self-heal, to rebalance. Biofeedback does nothing to the person. It is a tool for releasing that potential. And that's the objective, I believe, is the whole objective, is that we're trying to release the potential that we have. And this is how I think that this neurofeedback and the biofeedback and sustainability, how it will help Googlers, is it will help them to realize their potential more. Rather than trying to control it and force it, we allow it to happen and we release that potential. Thank you.